And we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jeffrey here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, episode number 51. Well, we are back, another week, another episode of the podcast. Well, almost not another episode of the podcast. If you guys have been following me on Instagram over the past week, I accidentally deleted my whole podcast. Yes, that's right. I deleted every single episode of my podcast, the entire catalog of my podcast from every podcasting platform except YouTube. Actually, it was still on YouTube, but if you were listening to it anywhere else, it was gone for the past week. And it just came back on Saturday morning, which was very nice. Glad that I did get the podcast back. You're obviously listening to this episode now, so you know it's back there and all the episodes should be restored. Please let me know if there's any episodes that you do notice that aren't there, because they all should be back now. But I want to run you guys through what actually happened there, because it's a bit of a story that I thought we could jump into today. It's a very hot afternoon in early January, and recording this episode here with a nice latte and just recording this episode just to be able to get something out for next week. And I thought that it would be really nice to go through this story before we jump into the topic of today's podcast. So basically what happened was I was in the process of, over the new year, thinking about some of the things that I could do with my podcast. Now, you heard probably on last week's episode about me trying to change up a few things and trying to be a bit more streamlined with the things that I do. So trying not to record as many video episodes of the podcast. I don't think I'm going to be uploading as many on YouTube anymore because I don't really see the returns on that. That is something that I'm not sure how it's going to go moving forward, because it's a lot of effort, a lot of input to not get much output from, and it's not something that I see a lot of return on. It actually slows down my process a lot and holds me back a lot in those creative ways, and I like to not have as many constraints on myself in that particular realm. So probably moving forward towards an audio-only podcast. I think I tried it out for a long time, and it's probably not going to be something that I continue with. One of the other things that I wanted to do was to change where I hosted my podcast. So if you guys are at all interested in hosting podcasts, you probably heard it in episode probably 20. I think I discussed how I actually host my podcast. So I host it on a platform called Buzzsprout, and that allows me to upload each week's episode directly onto there, and then it automatically distributes it to every podcasting platform. So onto Spotify, Apple Podcasts, onto Audible as well if you're listening on there, onto Google Podcasts, every other podcasting platform pretty much. So it'll distribute it for me automatically. I don't have to worry about that. I can upload each episode there, and I can change all the things or the artwork for the podcast, and that'll automatically get updated. So I can sort of schedule my episodes on there, and that automatically works for me. Now, the problem with hosting it on Buzzsprout was that it was charging me every single month to host my podcast. Now, I was paying about anywhere between $16 to $20 a month to host a podcast, which isn't an exuberant amount, but it was something that I wanted to streamline the process and move over to a new platform. I'm now over on Anchor.fm, which is owned by Spotify, so all in that sort of realm of trying to get that more easier process. I've just heard really good things about Anchor, and also it's free, so nice to be able to move over to that platform. I think in the early stages, I really wanted to host on Buzzsprout because I thought that if you're not paying for something, then you are the product. So I didn't want to be on a free platform, but I think over the year, I think Anchor has proved itself over the past couple of years and to be a good podcast hosting platform. And there's also a lot of other features that they're rolling out, especially through Spotify. They're rolling out a few features about some things that are interconnecting those two that will make it easier to host a podcast, especially on Spotify. And I think that's something that I really wanted to improve on going forward. So that was one of the big reasons for moving over there. Now, in the process of moving the podcast, it's not a very hard process to do. If you're ever moving a podcast, you just have to redirect where the stream of your podcast is. So when you're actually uploading when you're uploading your podcast to the catalog, you just move it over onto a new hosting site. So it's just like owning a website. If you want to move that website over, you still own the domain. You just have to move it over to who's actually hosting the website. So you're just moving everything directly over. So that was easy. But in the process, I found a version of my podcast from last year. So when I originally launched the podcast, I was initially going to launch it on Anchor, and I created a version of it on there. And when I went back into Anchor, I logged into my account and I already had an account there. So I just moved it directly into that account. And then I had two versions of the podcast with exactly the same names. Now, you can obviously see where this has gone wrong. I've gone in to delete the old version, but by mistake have deleted the new version or the actual version of the podcast. And I didn't realize this for a few days. I got an email from them just to confirm that I actually really wanted to delete this podcast? And I said yes, because I at that stage I was still assuming that it was the old version of the podcast. So I went through and confirmed the deleting, and then after a few days, Emily, my partner, said that she couldn't find my podcast on Spotify. And I thought that was a little strange. I hadn't gone on to upload an episode in the week. It had been a few days since I'd moved it over, and I hadn't gone on and actually checked on the podcast because I didn't have any reason to, and I normally don't log on until I have a new episode to upload. So I went back on there to check, and it's not there. And then I went back online and I went and checked on the other platforms, on Apple Podcasts, and it's not there. And then I thought, oh God, I better go and actually log into my account. I went to log into the account, and my account on Anchor was completely deleted. So there was no account there under my email address. So then I really started to get a bit concerned then, because I thought, well, I didn't only just delete my podcast, I deleted my whole account and everything was gone. So I emailed them back to one of the emails that they had emailed me with before. I just asking them about it, and I'm saying, where's my podcast gone? I'm really not sure what happened. I believe I deleted it, but I may have deleted the wrong version. And then I had to hang on for them to really get back to me. There's not anyone I could ring at Anchor to be able to directly speak to them. So I just had to hang on till they got back to that email. They did end up getting back to the email within probably 24 hours. They got back to me the next morning, which was really nice. And they just reinstated my whole podcast. They said that we can obviously see that you've accidentally deleted that whole version of the podcast. So they reinstated that, and it was all back, all ready to go again. So you should be able to see it exactly where it was before. Hopefully not much has changed. Hopefully everything is still there on your app. All the episodes that you've already listened to, hopefully that already stays there, and all that data is already there. It probably should be. Unless you've changed anything in your own app, it should all still be there. So that was a big sigh of relief when that came back, because that was something that was very stressful at the time, very stressful to think that I had just deleted a whole year's work of recording episodes of the podcast, especially when I hadn't actually yet uploaded episode number 50. I'm in the process of uploading episode 50 as I'm recording this episode at the moment, so you probably haven't heard that one yet. But to think about, I spoke about in episode number 50 about how much I've achieved on the podcast over the past year, and then to think that the whole thing was just erased overnight was a bit scary. But I was also thinking, I'm sure there's a way I can get it back. I knew there was a little bit of hope there, and so I was glad at the end of the day when I did get it back. I wouldn't let this deter anyone from starting a podcast or transferring a podcast. I think it was just an easy mistake on my part, a mistake that anyone could probably make, but I don't think it is an actual issue with any of the podcast hosting platforms. I think they're all really good, and I haven't had any issues with any of them. So far, all the ones I've used, I will let you guys know how I go on Anchor. If you're over there listening to the podcast on Spotify, hello, and hopefully we'll have some new things to roll out to you guys. I'm sorry if you're on Apple Podcasts, we may not get any new things from over there. There doesn't look to be much change going on over at Apple, but they did seem to get the game right early on, Apple, with their podcast hosting. So they did pretty well, and I think Spotify is still trying to catch up to them, as they just released the new rating system a couple of weeks ago, which was really good to allow new podcasts to be discovered, which is really nice. And hopefully we can really see some growth in the next year. The other thing that I really wanted to jump into this week after that long-winded story was a few other things that I've been working on. So I spoke about in last week's episode that I've really been working on prioritizing my wedding photography business. So prioritizing me being a wedding photographer. I think that's not something that I took as seriously as I probably should have last year. And I think there was obviously reasons for that. And I addressed that in last week's episode. And I hope you guys enjoyed hearing a little bit about that. But over the past couple of weeks, I've been trying to go more serious on it. I think Instagram was a big one for me that I really wanted to go hard at. I think I kind of put a goal on myself to not use my personal Instagram account as much and use my business one a lot more. There's that move that I'm trying to make towards having a personal brand, and I've always tried to have that personal brand, but I'm trying to currently shift it into being more of a wedding photographer. So shifting my personal brand to people actually knowing that I'm a wedding photographer. It's so hard out there if you're trying to put a personal brand out, but people don't know what that brand is. And if you've engaged a brand around something else, to try and shift it and transition it into something else can be hard. And so I'm trying to work out the logistics of that because, as I said last week, I still want to be working in that landscape photography realm, and that's something that I really enjoy and I'm really passionate about, and it's something that I found a lot of joy in over the last 12 months, but it's obviously not something that brings me in as much income. So that probably has to come secondary to my wedding photography. And in saying that, I really enjoy my wedding photography at the moment as well. So it's been really nice to transition a lot more and put more effort into that, because I can really see growth in that. And that's really inspiring to be able to continue moving forward, especially when you're enjoying something and you're seeing some sort of growth in it can really, really help you to really move on. And I saw that growth in my landscape photography last year when I was really dedicating a lot of time to it, but I found it hard to do both at once. And so I'm trying to find that happy medium and trying to find where I can fit. But I think at the moment I've got to make sure that I'm really going hard at my wedding photography and making sure that I'm turning up there and making sure that it's known that that is something that I am prioritizing. And so, yeah, I've been trying to be on my Instagram more. I've been trying to post more stories. I'm trying to post more behind the scenes. I'm trying to actually engage more on there and make it well known that it is something that I am really using and really utilizing as a way to connect with people. I think last year there was a big amount of time between not actually using that account at all. It's just like one of those new accounts that people open up. Every man and his dog has another Instagram account that they open because they think that they really want to start something else. And they just upload a few images on there and then you never hear from them again. I didn't want that to be what my wedding photography Instagram account was. And it wasn't really reflective of what I was trying to do in my business. I was actually working very hard behind the scenes, but there was nothing happening there. So people couldn't see that and people couldn't recognize that was something that I was working really hard on. You know, I think it really came to it because I recognized it when people were asking me questions about landscape photography. People, every time they saw me, were talking about other things and would never bring up my wedding photography at all. And if they did ask a slight question, it wasn't really aimed at anything that I'd been working on in the present. It was probably something that I'd done a long time ago that they had heard about. And so that made me think about, well, maybe I'm not out there enough. Maybe I'm not putting myself out there to the level that I probably think I am, to the level that I probably should be, you know? So that was really something that weighed on my mind. So the issue moving forward, just making sure that I'm keeping up to date with it. I know I'm doing a lot of work behind the scenes, but making sure that's known to other people out there. And it's not only just about Instagram as well. There's other things, other aspects to my business that I really want to be spending more time on, really making sure that I'm narrowing down on the things that I do and making sure that's very clear on the things that I'm working on every single week, because I think I could get confused and I could spend my time on the wrong things, and that's easily done. So making sure that I'm spending more time working on my website and working on updating things there and working on ads for my own business and making sure that my presence is known, because as work continues to grow, there's obviously going to be more work in it. I'm obviously going to be working with clients more, responding to more emails and things like that. So the work is going to continue to pick up. So we've got to make sure we get those basics down pat and making sure I'm focusing on the right parts of my business. And it's really been helping over the past couple of weeks. Now, the real question is it working? Now, I don't have a lot to really go on at the moment. It's only been probably 2 weeks, but I've had probably more inquiries in the last 2 weeks than I had in the last 2 months before that. And I don't know whether that's a case of it's the right time of year. I think it's always a good time of year to be getting inquiries as a wedding photographer in those first few months of the year. A lot of people do tend to get engaged here in Australia, especially over the summer period when they're on holidays, over the Christmas break, especially as well when they're away, when they're on holidays. A lot of people try to plan an engagement around that time. I think that's a really handy time to be able to get engaged and then to inquire within those first few months. I think as a photographer, you're probably one of the first cabs off the rank, especially after the venue is booked. You're probably the next one that gets booked after that. So people will start engaging with you fairly early on. And I've had a few more inquiries this week, but especially people saying that they've been from Instagram and people from not within my inner circle, people who aren't friends of friends, people who haven't ever known me before. So that is a good sign. I think that's a positive sign when people are turning up, not being people that you may directly know, not being people who know you through association or have been referred to you through someone. Maybe they've just seen some of your work on Instagram through another person's account or just on the explore page, you know, through just exploring some of my photos and being able to be more active on there. I think it's not only important to be able to convert someone in that way, but also, if they find a post from you on the Explore page, for example, they've got to be able to make a connection with you and your brand. So this really applies to any brand. If you're just posting photos out there, or if you're posting reels and they're ending up on the Explore page and people are finding you, the next thing they do is come to your account and they will check if you've uploaded any stories. If you've uploaded any story highlights, they'll go through those and they'll go through and read your old posts. If there's not much else there, if there's not much that they're engaged with, then it's easy for them to turn away. If they're not connected to you within that first few minutes of them actually being on your page, they're probably not even there that long. They're probably there for maybe 30 seconds. And if they're not engaged or connected to you as a person, then they're not going to follow your account. They're not going to stay engaged with future posts from you. So you can't expect to really hook someone in if you're not having anything there to present them when they do come. You can get a lot of people and you can share a post. You can have ads on Facebook. You can run ads and get people really liking your posts. But if they come to your account and there's nothing much else there that they think, I don't really feel engaged with this person, I don't feel a connection to this person, I'm probably going to move on. So you have to hook them immediately, and you have to make sure that the aim is to have heaps of stories up there. The aim is to have highlights in your stories to be able to get them hooked in to who you are as a person. Most of the time, as an artist, as any sort of artist, you're not the personal brand that is front-facing on an Instagram account or on your Facebook page or anything like that. You're probably not front-facing there. So the only thing that they've probably seen from you is your profile picture. And the rest of your work is all your work. So the rest of it may be images of other people, maybe your artwork, and maybe other pieces you've created. And that is all in your Instagram feed. So making sure you have stories there, making sure you have something of you, making sure you have a little bit of behind the scenes about how it is you work and your style and things like that. So making sure that people have something to connect to in that early stage, I think, is really important. And that has been a real priority for me, because I know that people do come to my page. I know that I get people come through word of mouth. I know that I get referrals as well. And so when people come to your page, the first thing that they do is stalk you a little bit. So you've got to have something there for them to immediately either connect with or not. And if you don't have anything there, then they're not going to connect at all. So that's an easy reason for them to just move on. And I think that is something that I've been trying to do. And I think it's been working for me. As I said, I think I've been getting a few more inquiries from people in that realm, and who have actually seen me on there and think that they may just reach out and they may inquire. And at least we're onto that stage where they've inquired with me, and we can then interact just one-on-one. And with all of that out of the way, let's jump into today's episode, which is all about why you're not getting a lot of work. Now, have you ever been in that position where you wonder why you're not getting any work? I'm sure all of us have been there. We haven't been getting as many inquiries. We haven't been getting as many people purchasing our work online. We've been trying to put our work out there. We haven't had any real interest. And we think the first thing we always jump to is we need to be advertising more. We need to be jumping to more marketing. We're not having our work in front of the right eyes. That is a really big thing. And it is true. It is important to be able to get your work in front of the right eyes. If you're not getting your work in front of anyone, then it's hard for people to inquire with you. It's hard for people to be buying your stuff. It's hard for people to be buying your products and services if you're not getting them in front of people. So making sure that they're in front of the right eyes. And I think that's something that we immediately gravitate towards. The other big thing we can probably think is that our prices are wrong. We can either think we're overpricing ourselves, we're underpricing ourselves, and that is making people question whether they should purchase from you. You're either way too expensive for them, or you're either underpriced, and they think, there might be something wrong with that person. They may be only new. Their brand or their quality of their work is not up to a standard, so we're not going to go with them. And then you may think that your client experience isn't great. You may think that the way you're marketing the products, the way you're delivering your products isn't great. The way that your client experience is going, your services may not be handled in a certain way that they're not leaving people with a great taste in their mouth. You might not be emailing people the right way. You may not be responding to people on social media the right way. So you try and change who you are to try and act like you're someone you're not, to try to give a service that isn't really standing for anything that you believe in. And that can be a quick way to the bottom, because you're never going to be able to maintain that if it's not something that you genuinely believe in. So these can all be things that we immediately jump to when we think that people aren't interested in our work. We think we need to change something. We think we need to change something external to our work that will make people then come to our work. It's either marketing, prices, or the experience around it. It's always a few of those things. But have we ever thought about maybe it's the product, maybe it's the service that's not right, maybe it's your product that's letting you down? And so I really want to have a talk about that this week, and I really want to talk about how that may be the case and how we can come to terms with that, how we can accept that and move on, because far too many people out there are wrapped up in thinking that it's everything else that's wrong. It can't be the product that's wrong. It can't be the service that they're providing that's wrong, when actually it may just be that. It may be that you haven't actually turned around and thought to yourself that your product isn't up to a certain standard. I think far too many of us ignore what our main service is. Far too many of us as artists ignore what our service is, because we're all wearing so many hats. We're trying to do so many different things. We're trying to be the marketing person. We're trying to be in customer service. We're trying to answer emails. We're trying to make sure our Instagram feed is up to date. We're trying to build out our own website and all these things like that. And we're not focused on what our product is. If we're not hard on what our main product is or what our main service is, then how can we expect people to come to you to want to purchase that from you? How can we expect people to spend their hard-earned money with you if you're not actually prioritizing that in your own business? And I think that is something that a lot of people overlook. I think people immediately jump to something else to be the issue in their business rather than turning around and looking at their product. And it's something a lot of people have. It's something that a lot of people who are new in the industry especially have, that they think that that is not something that they should prioritize early on and that there are so many other things to do. You know, it's interesting for me, when I first started my business, I look back and I think, where were the first points of interest for me in my own business? What were the first things that I tried to do and tried to make sure that they were perfect in my own business? And I think about it was probably my website and my name for my business, had to make sure that was perfect, had to make sure that Instagram was well curated, had to make sure that I was uploading all the time on there, I had to make sure my emails were great. You know, I had to make sure that I was invoicing well, that I had the whole client experience was really smooth, from if anyone ever inquired with me, here's how I'll respond to them with an email, and here's how the invoice will go out, and this is everything that I'll give them, and make sure my prices are all right, because I need to have all my packages lined up, ready to go, so that people know what they're in for. When I probably overlooked the product itself. I overlooked what it is I was actually trying to deliver to the clients. I overlooked my skill level. You know, we all start out in that naive state, which I think is great, to think that you're way ahead of the market. I think that's good. I think it's good to think that you're heaps more of an expert than anyone else, you know, to think that you're amazing, that you are the best artist in your field ever. You know, that's great to have that ambition. It's great to be that naive, because it helps you, it drives you, it really, really allows you to start your own business. You know, I would have never started my business if I didn't think I was up to a certain standard. You know, if I look back now, I'm probably nowhere near as good. I was probably nowhere near as good back then as I am now. And I was probably in no position to start a business back then, but I'm glad I did. You know, I was glad I was in that position because I've learned so much through that process, and I'm glad that people get to that. But I think we stop and we think about it, and we don't think heavily enough on the product we're providing. We don't think heavily enough about the art form that we've actually tried to do. We ignore that. We throw that out the window as soon as we start a business around something, around creating some type of art. We throw the art out the window and we start concentrating too much on other things in business. And we can ignore that, and it's easily a downfall for us, because people will stop spending their money with you. People won't want to spend money with you. People won't want to do business with you if your product isn't up to a certain standard. And if you're not constantly working on it, if you're not practicing those skills, you know, if you're not trying to build yourself up to improve in that sense, then it's going to be really hard. And it doesn't really matter what else it is that you do anywhere else in your business, because no one's going to spend any money with you. So how can we go about practicing these things? You know, we've got to make sure that we're prioritizing working. We make sure that we're prioritizing actually doing the things we like to do. And this goes back on a lot of the things that I've spoken about before. And I think one of the big things that holds people back from actually practicing in the start is they don't have anyone to practice on. They can't practice their work, and they don't want to work for free. It's going to be expensive to do work. If you're an artist that creates work, that actually creates a piece of art, it's going to be expensive to actually create that piece in the beginning if no one's going to purchase it from you. It's also hard in the beginning if you're in an art form where you're working with other people and you don't know anyone to work with, and you're not going to work for free because you think you should be paid for your services. I think we should throw all that out the window and just remember that we're only new in this. Any experience is great experience, and we shouldn't be worried about how much we're going to get paid in the beginning. You know, we're trying to do this to practice, regardless of whether the fact that the other person could be ripping you off or not. You're trying to do it to practice. So you've got to ignore what their motives are, what they're trying to do for you. You know, if someone else is trying to get you to photograph them for free, maybe you need to look past the fact that they're going to get that for free and look towards the point that this is invaluable experience for you. This is something that you are going to be able to improve your skills on. You know, you're going to be able to improve your product. You may not be improving the balance in your bank account, but at the end of the day, that doesn't matter, because you're improving your skills. And in the long term, people are going to be more likely to book with you because you have more skills than the person next door. So sometimes we need to reflect and think, maybe it's the product. Maybe we should be taking these opportunities to practice. We should be taking any opportunity to practice our work as much as we can. If someone comes to you and you're a painter and they say, I'd love an artwork for my house, would you be able to make something for me? And you ask them how much they're going to pay for it and they don't say anything at all, you're probably not going to do that work for them. Whereas if they said in the beginning, oh, we'll happily pay for the materials and you can just do the work, there may be a 50% chance that you may take them up on that offer. There's no expense for you. It's just you have to put in the time. Okay, maybe I will do it. However, if they say they're going to turn around and pay you $100, you might be like, yeah, for sure, I'll go and do that. Whereas if we look back on that now, I don't think we needed that $100, but we needed the practice. We needed the practice a lot more. We needed to make sure that we were practicing our art. And if there was you don't even need a reason to go practice your art. You can go do art for free. But if there was a person who came to you and said, I'd really like this art, wouldn't that be more beneficial to you to say, okay, I will do it for you. It's a good way to practice. It's under a brief. It's like working with the client. I'm getting good practice at that because I'm working to a brief. I'm working for someone else. So there's a bit of pressure there now, which is good because it's like a real world scenario. And all of a sudden I'm getting invaluable experience that I may have never gotten before. That even though I'm not earning any money from it, I'm getting great experience. And I think we throw that out the window in the beginning because we think we should be getting paid. We should be equally getting compensated for our time. Whereas sometimes you have to do away with that belief. You have to do away with that old school style of thinking and really put in the work. There are far too many people out there with way more experience than you. So you're already behind in that game. So if you're never going to take any experience, if you're never going to take chances, opportunities like this that will come up, then you're not going to get anywhere and you're not going to progress long term because you're thinking too much about how much money you're trying to make right now rather than thinking about what you could be making in a few years' time if you dedicate time and practice your skills in the here and now. So I just really wanted to make this point to you guys that sometimes it may not always be the other things. Sometimes it may not be your marketing. It may not be your curation of your Instagram account that is letting you down. It may actually be your product. And people may be actually looking at your products and services and thinking that they're not up to a scratch that they need to be. I've always sat back and thought about my work and thought, I could improve there. And I think that's a good thing. I think if we can sit back and critique our own work, if we can get to a point where we can accept that we're not the best and there's room to improve, then we've already made steps ahead of other people. Because far too many people are believing their work is the best and therefore they're not putting the practice in. They're not working to try to get more work. They're just trying to advertise work that they don't have. So we should be really taking the time, taking any opportunity to practice the skills and practice the craft that we love. Because at the end of the day, that's why we started this, because we really enjoy this craft. We enjoy the art form that we have decided to make a business out of. That's why you made a business out of it, because you really enjoyed it and you wanted to work every day of your life in it. So we should be taking any opportunity to practice that. And we should be really trying to build up our skills to be at that next level. We should be trying to constantly improve. And I don't think that any opportunity you could ever be taking is not worth it. So with that, guys, I hope you really did enjoy this episode. I hope you really thought about something. I hope this makes you think about a couple of different things. I hope it makes you think about some different things about inquiries that you've had before, or some people that have actually come to you with interest in your art before and have then probably turned away. I hope it's made you think about maybe it wasn't them and maybe it was nothing to do with them and maybe it was more to do with your products and your services, and thinking about ways that you could possibly improve in the future. And so if you did enjoy this episode, guys, I would really appreciate it if you could share this episode around with someone else who you may think would enjoy it as well. Someone else who's in an artistic career who could really use some of this advice. And, I don't always be this harsh on people, and I'm not always going to be this upfront with my advice every single week. We do talk about some other things that are a lot more lighthearted, but I thought this was an important episode to make. I think this is an important point to make to some people, and I'm sure that's something that I would have really benefited from hearing earlier on in my career, because it's not something that I've taken very seriously until very recently, because I never thought that there was an issue with my product, and maybe that there is, and maybe that there is something that I can do to improve, and I should always be trying to improve. So if anyone else can benefit from that, I am really glad to put this out there. And also, if you have been enjoying any of these episodes, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a rating on the podcast, either on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. I know there are heaps of people who have been listening to the most recent episodes of this podcast, but I haven't gotten that many ratings on the podcast yet. So I know you guys are out there and I know you're listening. So if you have been enjoying it, I would really appreciate it if you did leave a rating on the podcast. But with that said, I hope you all have a great week, guys, and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye.